Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Riv Readers podcast, hosted by Regina Library at Rivier University. I'm Katie McFarlane, your research and instruction librarian. This episode, we have a very special guest, Cheryl Bragdon. I'll let her tell you more about her very cool reading project. To get started, if you could let us know a little bit about your role here at the university.
So I've went to Rivier and I graduated with my nursing degree in 1987. And I have been a nurse ever since. I came back to Rivier and got my bachelor's degree. And then I came back to Rivier again and got my master's degree in nursing education. When I finished that degree, I became the sim lab director. So I was here for 6.5 years from 2013 until 2020 as the sim lab director. And then I left to go back to taking care of patients. Mannequins were fine, but you may remember what was going on in 2020.
Right.
And I decided to go back to the bedside. So I did that, but I come back and teach the mental health sim every spring semester.
That's awesome. Would you tell us a little bit about your awesome reading project?
Well, I've always loved to read. And I always had, your typical genre. We all have one thing we migrate to. And so I always read like murder mysteries, and they were great, and I was loving them. But I had started through the Sim Lab, I had met a wonderful woman named Rosemary, who was part of the RISE program.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she and I talked about books and how much she loved books. And she was an avid reader. And so she would give me a list of all the books that she had recently read. Like twice a year, she'd bring me a list and I would start working down her list. And she would read different stuff. So it kind of got me interested in, all right, let's read something else. And I love lists anyway. I mean, I make a list on my day off of what I want to accomplish. I just make lists of lists of lists. So working with a list was fun for me. And I had also done like Facebook had a list of like 100 classics everyone should read. And so I went down through it and I was really excited because I'd already read like 45 of them. And then I was like, well, if I've already read this many, I can't not read the rest. So I worked off that list for a little while. There was a list that the Huffington Post did maybe 2016, and it was like 20 books every woman should read from the last 5 years or something like that. And that was a very cool list. I got some very interesting books out of that one. But then I discovered, I forget how I ran into it. There was a book out there that was published in 2018. So I bought it for Christmas. It was my Christmas present to myself. And it is 1,000 books everyone should read before they die by James Mustich.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, 1,000 books. There we go. That'll keep me busy.
Yeah.
So I have been slowly working my way through that book. Some people would say not so slowly because I love to read and I'm a little bit addicted to it. Like, well, I can't take a walk right now. I have to read more of my book, you know? In fact, one of the providers where I work actually said, do you really think you're going to finish all 1,000 books? And at the time, so this was early 2019, and I basically said, if I live for 26 more years, because the books are all organized by author alphabetically. So there's A through Z. So I'm like, if I tackle one letter a year, I just have to live 26 more years, and sure, I'll get through it all. But I actually am happy to tell you that now it has been 5 years and I am more than halfway through my 1,000 books.
That pace is just incredible. I'm so in awe.
I like to read. I should exercise, but I like to read.
Well, and I was going to ask, like, do you just read print books or do you do like audiobooks or?
I do a lot of different things. So I obviously don't want to buy 1,000 books. So I've been very fortunate because my first stop is my Rivier Library catalog. And I go through the Rivier Library and figure out if you have it. And I would say probably for every letter, you have approximately a third of all of the books that are in that letter.
I'm going to have to check this book and like check it against our collection, see what we need to buy.
But some of the books are older and kind of out of
Sure.
print, so that'll prevent some of that. But then I'll go through my town library of Mount
Mhm.
Vernon, and I go through Libby, which is the New Hampshire
Yep.
library. So it might be print, it might be Kindle version, it might be an audiobook.
Okay.
Our through my library, we also can use Hoopla. So
Oh, sure.
sometimes I'll use Hoopla and I'll do some audiobooks. So sometimes I do listen and take a walk and do things like
Yes.
that. And I've used the Rivier digital editions as well.
Oh,
Sometimes it's not
awesome.
a print book per se.
Yeah, I
For
know
me.
especially a lot of the classics, we've kind of found them from open sources and like linked to them, like Project Gutenberg kind of things and
Mhm.
linked to the digital copies in our catalog. That's
Yep.
awesome though. Like I know with me, the Libby, like the waiting list just drive me insane. And I'll like request a book and then I like totally forget that I even requested it by the time it's available.
Right.
But Hoopla is that the one where you have like you can do so many instant
Yeah,
borrows
you have four a
a month?
month.
Oh, that's
So
way better.
yeah, and so there you don't have to wait for anybody, it's just there. I don't think what they have is necessarily as big as Libby, but the other thing, Libby tends to have more of the current stuff, and
Mm.
I'm looking at stuff that's, some of it's been published
Oh yeah.
hundreds of years ago, and some
That's
of it was
true.
published a decade ago. So
Yep.
it's all kind of what's been fun about this list is I'm reading so many different things.
Yeah.
There's been graphic novels on there. There's been history stuff. There's been things like St. Augustine's Confessions.
Oh, sure.
I didn't think I would enjoy that. I laughed through that whole book. I thought it was
That's
so fun
awesome.
because he literally is a man who was being called by God to become a priest, and he didn't want to give up his wife and his girlfriend and the things that went along with having a woman in your
Mm.
life. And so he was like, seriously, God, you really want me to do this? And I was like, wow, nothing's changed.
Wow. Oh, that's so
But
funny.
and I've read cookbooks and I've read humor books and I've read a lot of history, which has been interesting. And some of these books a couple of them have been thousands of pages long.
Wow.
The Power Broker is about Robert Moses from New York, and he kind of created a lot of in like 1920, he was creating a lot of the infrastructure, the roads, the thoroughfares that New
Mm.
York City has, and some of the parks and things. And it's a 3-book series, and each book was like 800 to 1,000
Oh
pages
my
long.
gosh. Wow. And so you had to read all three as part of
I
or was
wanted
it
to,
just,
so
okay.
sometimes they'll just have the first one, but I'm like, I
Oh,
can't
okay.
like just read one.
Right.
Um, and right now I'm actually listening to a book on tape called the Pax Britannica, and there's 3 books, and this is the middle one. And I just started listening to it, and I'm kind of like, this is the middle one. I should be
I have to go back.
checking out the other two. Yeah. So
Wow. Now, does the author go into like his inclusion criteria of like how he came to all these?
yeah, so that's one thing I have been interested in. And there is an introduction in the book, and he talks a
Okay.
little bit as to why he picked what he did or how he came about it. But sometimes I'll sit back and after I finish a book, like, why did he pick this one? And,
Yeah.
there is a blurb in the book. So there's like a little, like every page is like a book, and then it talks about why that book was important,
Okay.
what was
Okay.
about that book. So sometimes I'll sit there and be like, why? And then I'll go back and read, what was he thinking or what had he heard or
Or
different
like
things.
what
So,
the historical context was around that, like
right.
maybe the book itself doesn't seem, reading it, you're like, okay, yeah, sure. But then you think about how it like impacted historical societies or
Exactly. Or like it was a book that maybe it was the first one of its genre. So I
mm.
actually read, I think it was an Ursula Le Guin,
Oh yeah,
like science fiction kind of thing, but it was science fiction written in like 1950. So
sure. Yep.
science fiction has changed throughout the years.
Right.
But they were saying that for a woman to write a fantasy science fiction novel was pretty rare, and
Yep.
she was kind of like the first one to do that. So
Yep.
that was why he picked that. He had reasons why he picked the one he picked because she had
Sure.
several books, but it was Wizard of Earthsea was
Oh
the one
yeah,
he
yep.
picked. And he
When you
had,
said her name, I was like, I bet it's that one.
yep,
It's the one I
yep,
hear
it
about all the
was.
time.
Yep. And I
Oh,
think that's
cool.
because it was her first one. So
Okay,
he actually was like, it may not be her best one, but because it was her first one, it was leading the genre and leading for her, being a woman writer of this genre. So he picked
sure.
the first one.
Kind of that groundbreaking work that
Yeah.
laid the foundation. Well, you kind of talked a little bit about it, but like, do you have any more to add about why you decided to embark on this challenge?
Just because I like to read, and I thought this way I would be encouraged to try some different genres and learn some new things. I've learned a lot of history, and that's been
Mm.
cool. And there was a book called Cooking with Clementine, and it was basically an American family who had moved to France, and they hired Clementine to be their cook. And so they had money enough to, have a cook. And so he was so enamored by her cooking that he would follow her around and like copy down her recipes and talk about how,
Oh,
he did the best that he could, even though she did a lot of, oh, you just stir it till it looks
just a
like
pinch
this.
of
And you,
this and a yeah,
exactly, a pinch of this, a pinch of that, and just stir it till it looks like this.
yeah.
But so the book told the story of like his life in France, his family. He was a young boy, and interspersed were recipes. And I've actually decided to cook a few of them because I
Oh,
wanted to
that's so
try them and
cool.
see what they were like. So that's actually a cookbook that's now on my on my cookbook shelf.
Nice. Oh, that
Which,
reminds me of like Julie and Julia. Did you ever
yeah,
see that movie?
I did. It was a great movie. Yep.
I love that there is like a variety, like you said, of the different
Oh, right.
types of
Right.
materials, not just fiction or nonfiction.
There was this
Yeah.
really funny graphic novel. It was humorous. It's called Can We Talk About Something More Pleasant? And
Ah,
the author is Roz Chast. And it was hilarious because it's a graphic novel, but her family owned a funeral home. And so it
oh,
was kind of like a
wow.
memoir in a
Sure.
graphic novel format of her growing up. Do we have to talk about dead people all the time?
You're just surrounded by it.
Yeah, yeah, it was a great book.
Do some of the titles start to kind of blur together? You're like, I know I
Oh,
read this,
definitely.
but like then I read so many more.
Yes. Yes. I go
Yeah.
back through, I'll be looking for something. I'll go back through. I don't remember that title. Did I actually read
Did
that
I read it?
book? It's checked off. I must have.
So you said you're a little over halfway through now. What are you like? What letter are you on, and
I
what
am
books are
on
you
the
reading now?
M's. I'm
Okay,
on the M's. So on Hoopla through an audiobook, I am listening to Pax Britannica.
okay.
And then my book that I have from your library sitting on my end table is The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt by Edmund Morris.
Oh, okay.
So I just started that one. So
Sure.
I'm looking forward to that. And I actually have on also through Hoopla, I have a digital book on my phone because The
Nice.
Rise of Theodore Roosevelt is like 600 pages long. So it's a big book to carry around if I just have a few minutes standing in line or
Yep.
a few minutes waiting for something. So I also have The First Day on the Somme. It's about
Okay.
World War One. So I have
Wow.
that. So some people are like, you have three books going at once. How do you
Oh
keep
no.
track of that? And I'm like, well, I try to stick with different subjects. Like, like I try not to read two or three World War One books at the
Right.
same time because I will get confused.
Sure. Yep.
And I don't often have digital as well as print going at the same time, but I actually just got back. My daughter lives in San Francisco, and I just got back from visiting her. So I had my Kindle
Nice.
with me out there and my phone. So I didn't want to
Sure.
carry a heavy book on the plane. So I was doing more digital. But
Yep.
now that I'm home, I'll get back into Teddy Roosevelt.
I've always wanted to like have a print book going, but then like have an audio or an ebook version of that same one, like going at the same
Oh,
time so that you could be like, oh, where did I leave off? I can just pick that up and read it
see, I
elsewhere,
think I
but
would spend so much time trying to find my
where
spot
you left off.
that I wouldn't have any time to read.
Well, I think if you do it through Amazon, I think they have this
It'll
thing called
link.
Whisper Sync. Yeah, and I'm like, that is just the coolest thing. Like it would pair up your ebook and your
Yeah,
audiobook or whatever. I'm like,
yeah.
we need more of that in this world.
And I have the Kindle app on my phone, and
Uh-huh.
I know that will link up too. So like if I'm
Yes.
reading a Kindle book and then I don't have my Kindle with me, but I have my phone with me, I
Yep.
can always open it with the app.
And that's so
Um,
handy.
and it will sync. with
Yep.
that, as long as my Kindle's not on airplane mode.
Right. True. So have you had any like really standout like favorite reads from this project?
The very first book in the 1,000 books that everyone should read was a book called Desert Solitaire by Edward Albee.
Oh yeah, I've
And
heard of him.
I I had not really heard of him. I didn't really know anything about it. I don't necessarily read the books in order. I
Sure.
will have all the A's. I'll read all the A's, but I bounce around in my list of A's depending on where I get the book, what it looks like, how much
Yep.
time I have, can I really get into a deep one right now or do I need a smaller one? Wasn't necessarily the first book I read on this project, but it was near the beginning because of his name is an A. But he is like a naturalist who was very involved in like the creation of Moab National Park out in Utah.
Oh, okay.
And so this was before it was really a national park. He was dropped out there to like monitor things and keep track of things and inventory things
Hmm.
and like rocks or whatever. And so he lived out there and his writing is beautiful. Like,
Really?
the area around there is so different from New Hampshire that it's gorgeous anyway and very strikingly different. But he did such a nice job of describing the scenery. It felt like you were there and you just were in love with the scenery. And he did a hike down the Grand Canyon and he was talking about that and describing it as he's going. And it was a beautiful book. I was like,
Oh,
I would have
cool.
never looked on a shelf and thought, oh, let me read this. Desert Solitaire did not grab me. I didn't really know anything about Edward Albee. And I was
Right.
like, that's why this project means a lot to me because I loved the book. It was fabulous. And I would not have picked it up off a shelf.
So cool. What happens if you just cannot get through a book? Like if you're just totally bored?
I struggle with that. There are a couple of books that I will admit I have read every word of. And when I shut the book at the end, I have no idea what I read. But I have to finish this. So my eyes laid on every word. And I'm just a little bit OCD about my lists. So I struggle with that because some people are like, why waste your time? Because you're not going to love every one of these books. And I'm
Right.
like, but it's on the list. But I have to tell you, there is a book right now on my Kindle. It's called Zilboni. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right, but basically, this man was kind of like a philosopher. And he basically had a diary where he just recorded his thoughts. So if something popped into his brain, he wrote it down. Then he died, and somebody looked at this diary and said, this is full of fascinating information. People need to know this. This stuff, deep thinking. So they published his diary,
Wow.
which is disorganized. It's not meant for publication. It literally is this paragraph is a blurb about what I thought about bluebirds, and this paragraph is a blurb about what I thought about how the English language corresponds with the Spanish language.
Wow.
And so he's like all over the place. And the worst part is when I opened the Kindle book, you know how it
Mhm.
tells you how long it takes you to read it?
Oh yeah.
100 hours.
Ugh.
So, in all
That's
honesty,
rough.
in all fairness, I will read a paragraph and then I will just kind of click, click, click through the pages and find another paragraph. That one looks like I
Something
could
that
read it.
jumps out.
And click,
Yeah.
click, click through the pages. So, I am not spending 100 hours reading this book because it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, and that seems like one of those things that's kind of okay. Like if you pick it up and put it down for a bit and then you can come back to it and kind of
Yeah.
just
And
because
read a
it's
little
not
bit
like
of it, try to
organized.
absorb it, try to mutter, like, why did he think he needed to expound upon this idea?
And it's just like stream of consciousness, kind of like writing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Gosh.
exactly. Because
Wow.
it wasn't meant for publication. It was his own little journal of notes that he just, when
Wow.
something popped in his head, he wrote down.
And you have to wonder, like, what would he think of it
Right.
being published? Like,
Yeah.
if he told somebody, make sure you publish this when I'm gone, or was just,
Right. Yeah, I have no
wow.
idea. I have
Oh,
no idea.
it's
But
tough.
so, in response to your question, yes, there have been a few books that I will either finish just because I read every word, but I have no idea what I read. Some people would, if they were that neurotic about it, might go back and be like, well, I have to figure out what I read, but I don't. I read
No,
it.
you got through
Okay.
it. Yeah.
I can move on.
No, and I think the fact that you've stuck to it as much as you have already is more than impressive. So I just have one question left. What is on the horizon for like your next books? Do you have anything in like the N's and the O's kind of that you've been eyeing?
I haven't really. I don't really jump ahead too much. What is kind of interesting is there is only one Q. So under
Oh,
the
yeah.
letter Q, there's only one, and it's the Quran. Um,
Oh,
so I actually have it on my Kindle and thought that it was going to be
oh,
long, like, reading the Bible. And
right.
so the under the bees, the Bible did exist under the bees, but
Okay,
I have read the Bible through several times in my
sure.
lifetime. So if I've read a book, I am not rereading
Gonna
it
reread. Yeah.
necessarily unless I really loved it and I really wanted
Yeah,
to read it again. But if I flip through like the Diary of Anne Frank, I've read that and
sure.
there was some classics and stuff that I had read and I'm like I'm not going to reread I've read it. So I
Yeah,
could check
yeah,
those off. There haven't
definitely.
been too many that I could check off, but well, the other thing, he actually includes children's books as well, which
Oh,
is kind
cool.
of fun because, like Goodnight Moon,
Yep.
which I've read a million times. So I didn't, I had children, I read it a million
Yep.
times. So I didn't necessarily want to reread that. But another thing I've done with it is my children are in their 20s now. And, someday maybe I'll be a grandma.
Hmm.
So as these children's books come through, I've tried to like purchase them.
Oh, that's
So, like under
awesome.
the M's, we of course have Winnie the Pooh. And
Sure.
so I bought the book so that I could put it on my bookshelf. And
Oh,
I was just, oh, Harold and the Purple Crayon, which is
oh,
a board book,
yes.
which that was one of the books that he chose in this book as like a book that everyone needs to read. And
Yeah.
so I bought that and it's on my shelf. So I'm kind of
Oh,
growing my shelf of books that I could read to
get a little
people,
library.
little people.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that idea.
Because
That's so
I
sweet.
loved reading with my kids. I did a
Yeah.
lot of reading with my kids and I had a lot of fun reading and I tried to make it real. Like I love Laura Ingalls Wilder.
Mhm.
I've read her books through a million times, Little House on the Prairie. And when my
Sure.
son was like 3 or 4, I was reading Farmer Boy to him. My mom and I had gone to
Oh.
visit relatives in Michigan. We're
Hmm.
driving back through New York. We're on the New York State Thruway. I'm reading Farmer Boy to him. And my mom
Wow.
and I look at each other and we're like, where's Malone, New York? So we get out a map, we figure out where it was. We call my husband, sorry, we're going to be a day late. We're taking a detour. And we drove to Malone, New York, where Farmer Boy's house is,
Oh
which is
my
actually a museum
gosh.
that you can go to. So we were reading about
Wow.
it. We took my son there. It was, and those are
How
the kinds of things I
cool.
love to do. I love to
Yeah.
make the book come alive, or in research something.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I was going to say even for the books that you've read in the past, probably just like reading the little blurbs too about, how the author chose them is just, going to fill it right back in for you. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
So books have been a big part of my life.
I love it. We love to hear that at the library.
And it's not, I'm not just reading this list either. Like I belong to two different book clubs and book
Oh.
groups. And so we're reading different books for that. And I'm
Mhm.
also expanding my horizons and reading other things
Wow.
as well.
it's so impressive to me because I'm a very slow reader. I do multitask, but like I'll maybe hit like 35 books a year if I'm lucky, but like I'm guessing you're probably
I'm a fast
you track
reader.
that.
I've
Yeah.
always been a fast reader. I remember being in fourth grade and reading Nancy Drew.
Mhm.
And I would start a book over breakfast. I would finish it at lunchtime at school because I would read all through recess and read all through lunch.
Wow.
Then I'd have to bring another book with me because afternoon I'd start another one. On the bus home, I'd be reading the second one. Sometimes I would read 3 Nancy Drew books in a day because I would go
Wow.
home, I'd get my homework done, and then I'd curl up and read. And then I would be like almost done. My mom would be like, turn off your light, go to sleep. I got like 3 more chapters. I can't turn it off yet.
The struggle is real.
It
Like I could
is.
finish or I could sleep.
Nope. Gotta finish.
And were you borrowing the Nancy Drew books from the library, or did you have the
A
whole
lot of
collection?
them I did borrow from the library, but my mother was a teacher, so she was an avid reader, and I think I got my avid reading from her. So we had some pretty good bookshelves, and I
Mhm.
think the Nancy Drew books were actually hers. So I was reading the ones she had, and then I would go to our town library to fill in
Pick up some more.
where she had missing ones or something.
That is so cool. I love to hear, the family, how you've passed that down over the generations. Well, thank you so much, Cheryl. I really appreciate you taking the time to fill us in on your project. And I'm thinking, man, we're going to have you back like when you are getting close to the end or something.
In 5 more years.
We need an update. Yeah.
How many books did I skim through and how many books did I actually read? I would
Yeah.
say, I mean, I'm halfway through 1,000 books, and I would say I've skimmed through maybe four
Wow. That's
that
so
I've
impressive.
actually read everything else.
Wow.
Sometimes, and then I go back, did I actually read that? I don't remember much about it. So maybe I read too fast sometimes, but
But you're getting through your list.
I'm getting through my list.
That's so cool. It's so great.
It was fun talking about it.
If you'd like to follow us on social media, we are at Regina Library on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And we're also now on TikTok at regina.library. You can always reach us through our website too. It's been great having you here, and we'll see you again next time.